both Yasmin and Tishan's remaining 2 workshops today. Thank you for coming. We will, I guess, move forward right away. So over to you, Yasmin.
Okay, thanks. Hello, everyone. Thanks for being here. In this presentation, I'm going to talk about the German-American composer Barbara Arens. I had the pleasure of coming across with Barbara Arens' works while I was looking repertoire for my piano students. But at the time, I was living in Argentina and I had only a sample available in one of her websites. The collection that I got to know at the time was called Piano Paintings, and it's a collection that she did with another pianist called Alison Matthews. Anyways, for that, the collection, the presentation will focus on 2 specific parts. First, in the biographical sketch, which has important highlights of her personal life that they were a huge influence in her piano works. And then we are going to walk in a survey of pieces with collections with different themes and styles. Something that characterized Barbara Arens is her taste of integrating a program into her pedagogical compositions, as much as the integration of different styles and presentations into her pieces. So, without further ado, let's start with the biographical sketch. Barbara Arens was born in Lebanon in 1960. Her father was an international lawyer, and because of that, during her infancy, she lived among Lebanon, Singapore, US, and Austria. At the age of 13, she was admitted in the Mozarteum of Salzburg. In this institution, she studied harpsichord and organ with renowned musicians, including the famous conductor Nikolaus Harnoncourt. Barbara Arens herself says that this stage of her life was a meaningful experience for her to become a musician and also a piano teacher. Additionally, Barbara Arens also played the flute, and when she was 13, she played for 1 year in the National Youth Symphony Orchestra of this country. So, later, at the age of 19, she became the 2nd organist at the Salzburg Cathedral. In the 80s, Barbara Arens became harpsichordist in several chamber music groups. With these groups, she toured around Europe, recorded LPs, and also had public appearances on the radio. Also, in 1990, she decided to come back to the piano as her main instrument. This decision matched with her wedding with Lager Arens, a Greek and Latin professor of high school in the region of Baviera, a place in which she has been living since the early 90s. In 2002, she started a concert season called Concert for Kids. In these concerts, she realized that her pieces were especially popular, which motivated her to keep composing. So, in 2008, she started to compose a collection of pieces that later we got to know as one-hand piano. This collection was published by Breitkopf Härtel later in 2013. The collection had such a success that Barbara Arens also did a 2nd volume years later. An important fact to say is that Barbara Arens published not only one-hand piano but also 5 other collections, among them 21 amazingly easy pieces, piano misterioso, piano vivace, piano tranquillo, piano exotico, and small hand piano. Additionally, the contract that Barbara Arens has with this publisher only allows her to publish 1 collection per year. So this motivated her to keep looking for publishers interested in publishing her work. So eventually she started to publish collections with Musica Ferrum, an English publisher, Streta Music, and Trinity College London Press. Furthermore, in 2018, she started to publish her own books as a self-published composer. Besides the repertoire that Barbara Arens wrote for piano solo, Barbara Arens wrote other 19 collections for melodic instrument or voice and piano, and 5 additional collections with the pianist Alison Matthews. As we are going to see and listen, Barbara Arens is a very eclectic composer and very empathic into the interest of her students, and her production and repertoire reflects that. Now that we know Barbara Arens, we can start with the survey of collections. An important detail is that Barbara Arens has recorded all her compositions, which are available to listen in her YouTube channel at Barbara Arens. And in fact, the recordings that we are going to listen to today are her own renditions. So without further ado, we are going to start with collections based in poetry. The first set of collections are inspired in poetry, but however, the poetry has been used in different ways. So, additionally, Barbara Arens is also a writer and a poet, and some of her poems are present in the collections that we are going to see. The first collection of this set is Rendezvous with Midnight, 12 plus 1 Nocturnes for Kings for piano solo. The entire collection is inspired by a poem by Walt Whitman, but at the same time, each piece is also inspired by a poem itself. All the pieces are character pieces, as the title indicates. They are all nocturnes. And the first piece, or the piece that I chose to represent this collection, is called Nuit Blanche. Is inspired by the US poet James Thompson, who used the expression Nuit Blanche, which means basically it means insomnia in French. So the majority of the piece happens in white keys, and when the author is about to reach the end, incorporated one black key, the C sharp, which basically symbolizes the moment in which the character finds sleep. In terms of the musical characteristics of the piece, we can see that the first section starts in 5/16 with a texture, with an accompaniment texture that resembles a moto perpetuo. Whereas the left hand has a bass that remains static for many measures. This gets repeated along the entire section. The second section is in 4/8, and it has a similar layout, but the right hand has a more angular intervals. We are going to listen to Nuit Blanche, a piece levels 6/7 by Barbara Arens herself. Based on the rendition and the characteristics of the piece, what we can observe is that the work with rhythm will be paramount for the student to understand the equivalence between the note values with which we can measure the different time signatures. The next collection that I'm going to introduce in this set of collections based in poetry is All Beautiful and Splendid Things. case, the poems selected by Barbara Arens are written by women, and Barbara Arens even decided to include one poem written by herself as an inspiration for one of her pieces. The duration of each piece usually tend to be slightly smaller, or they last less in comparison with the nocturnes that we just listened. And because the poetry is integrated as a lead Russian song, this invites to the student also to play pieces that are easier. The piece that I chose to represent this collection is called A Winter Night, and is inspired by the US poet Sarah Tisdale. In this case, what we can see is that in regard to texture, we have a left hand which is quite static, and a right hand that has quarters that mirrors the quarters that the pianist plays in the left hand, and then also an intermediate line intertwined that mirrors the content of the poetry. As you can see in this case, as I was saying before, the poetry is incorporated in the piece. So this has two meanings. First, invites the pianist to read the poem as they are playing. Also, they can be sung. It's planned that the composer thought that the performer could sing the piece. But besides that, I found that this piece specifically, and the pieces of this collection, resembles a characteristic of the pieces by Satie in a collection called Ave de Pensier, in which the poems are intertwined in the pieces of this collection. So, we are going to listen to A Winter Night, again in the rendition by Barbara Arens. This is a piece level 5. Interested in the incorporation of poetry into her pieces, but the two collections, they do it in a very different way. The following set of collections are inspired by geography. Barbara Arens likes to travel a lot, and sometimes she has done it in person, but other times she has done it with her imagination. Also, she likes to research a lot about the music of the destinations that she gets inspired by. So, in this case, she adapts folk tunes, music idioms, and even pop music from the places in which the collection is set. The first collection of collections inspired by geography is Compass 4x3 atmospheric piano solos. And in each set of pieces, they have a very specific characteristic. First, they can be considered character pieces because they can be played by their own, but at the same time, they can be considered a suite because of this thematic unity among them. Barbara Arens called these pieces triptychs, as if they were a painting of a place that she is trying to portray. The four different parts of these collections are Legends of the Western Isles, based on Scottish tunes, Rhythms of the South, based on music from Argentina, Brazil, and Cuba. The following selection is Snows from the North, with music inspired from Russia and Finland. And the last part of the collection is called Flowers of the East, inspired by music from Korea, Japan, and Vietnam. Barbara Arens wrote a foreword of the book, but also a foreword for each specific set, in which she explains in detail how she got inspired or how she decided to integrate the music of the destinations of each set. Additionally, she feels particularly proud by the level of emotional depth, portraying joy and sorrow in equal parts. The piece that we are going to listen to in regard compass is a piece called Dangerous Waters, based on two traditional Scottish tunes. Barbara Arens traveled to Scotland and she has incorporated Scottish tunes and Scottish music in a lot of her collections, including compass. As we can see, the piece has a chordal introduction and then has an accompaniment in the A section that is baroque type based on the dotted rhythms that we have, with a harmonic rhythm that lasts 2 measures. This piece, Dangerous Waters, has 3 parts: an A section in major mode, a B section in which the composer modulates to major mode, and then an A section that closes the piece. Something that I found as I was listening and playing the piece is the fact that the first theme, especially the introduction, remind me to the soundtrack of Pirates of the Caribbean. And if you watch the TV show Outlander, you are going to listen to that the folk tune that it gets integrated in the B section is exactly the opening theme of that show. This is a piece level 7 and 8, and so let's listen. Dangerous Waters. collection of this set is called Piano Exotico 28 Dream Journeys, and it was published in 2017 by Breitkopf Härtel. This collection is a globe-trotting around the most recommended places in the world and also less musically explored. The places that serve of inspiration to this collection specifically are, for example, Greece, India, also the integration of klezmer music, Portuguese fados, Hawaiian music, among other incredible destinations. The pieces of this collection are character pieces, although they have a single texture and very specific features to develop. So some of them, they focus more on rhythms, other ones in agility, other ones in expressivity, so on. Which means that potentially these character pieces can be considered etudes or to be used as if they were etudes. The piece that I chose to represent this collection is called Bollywood Anyone. Bollywood is a city in India, the capital of the cinema in India, and it's basically the name, the contraction is done between Bombay, which is the ancient great name of Mumbai, and Hollywood. So it's the blend between those two. So in this case, at the musical level, what we can observe is that the left hand has a repetitive ostinato that remains the same in D note along the entire piece. As we can see, the time signature technically is in D major, but the majority of the time, at least in this first section, we don't see the leading tone except close to the end in the cadence that we have at the end of the section. There are a lot of ornamentation that needs to be properly worked because it's very difficult to match the ornamentation with the proper rhythms that we have on the left hand. Additionally, the second part integrates the Arabian scale, a scale that basically is based on the two upper tetrachords of the harmonic scale. So basically what we have is it's one half step between the second and the third note. The level of the piece is level 5, and as I was explaining before in regard to the characteristics of this collection, we have one single type of texture and one single type of technical difficulty that remains the same the entire piece. Additionally, as you're going to listen to in the second section, the addition of tablets, brings another layer of complexity in regard to rhythm. So let's listen Bollywood Anyone. So basically what we can realize based on these two collections that they are based on different destinations is that in the case of compass we have pieces that they are grouped as if they were suites. Whereas in Piano Exotico we have single character pieces that they are shorter and also slightly easier in comparison with compass. The next set of collections that we are going to see and listen are collections inspired by characters. What they have in common, the two collections that we are about to listen to about, is that they have very specific interest. In comparison with the ones that they are about geographic locations, these ones are targeting either different ages or more specific interests. In the case of the first collection, we have All the World's a Stage, a book inspired by Shakespeare characters. In fact, All the World's a Stage is a phrase in one of Shakespeare's pieces called As You Like It. The composer in the foreword called these pieces miniatures, and she specifically intended that they don't last more than 2 pages. However, this collection and the first one that we spoke about today, the one of the nocturnes, they have in common that usually the pieces have 2 pages, and then there is one piece that has 1 page, and then one piece that has 3 pages. I think that Barbara did this on purpose to have a slightly easier piece and then one is slightly more complex in regard the common level of the collection. The piece that we are going to listen to and study is Lady Macbeth Sleepwalking. So this piece is based or inspired by the theater play Macbeth, which is basically inspired in the main character, Macbeth, who is a general who basically wants to do a political maneuver in order to become the King of Scotland. Among the most important events of the play, Lady Macbeth, his wife, goes crazy after she feels guilty because of the amount of assassinations and all the intrigue around her husband becoming the King of Scotland. So this episode, the moment in which Lady Macbeth is sleepwalking, is in between these moments in which she is not in a good mental state. In regard the musical characteristics of the piece, what we can observe is that the left hand has a patterned accompaniment that remains the same the entire piece. The piece usually uses mostly primary chords, so we have 1, 4, 5 along the entire piece. However, the use of chromatic scales brings a lot of dramatism and interest to the piece. This piece is ideal to develop expressivity, and it's in between the average level of the collection. Another important thing is that Barbara Arens is quoting Verdi's Macbeth, so in a way that piece is a sort of paraphrasis, like imitating Liszt pieces. So we're going to listen to Lady Macbeth Sleepwalking in Barbara Arens' rendition. This is a piece level 7. Of this set is the Vampire Challenge. Excuse me. The second collection of this set is the Vampire Challenge, a collection written in the voice of Count Dracula. So, within the book we have comments in which the composer explains the pedagogical content of the book, but at the same time she writes in the voice of Count Dracula. So the students can switch between the technical explanations, but also have fun reading whatever Dracula has to say about the piece of choice. This collection, as many collections by Barbara Arens, has a foreword in which introduces the collection, but then each specific piece also has an introduction. In this collection, what we can observe is that Barbara Arens is particularly interested in incorporating more modern music into her piano collections, and also to present pieces in a different display. And you are going to see now why I'm saying this. The piece that I chose to represent this collection is called Revenge. Revenge is based on a Scottish folk tune that it has a legend around it, in which the protagonist invites to two men that apparently committed a murder to stay at their house so she can revenge. An important thing, as you probably realized already, is that this piece is basically a lead sheet. So Barbara Arens is introducing this piece in order to students get acquainted with this type of writing. And overall, the piece has the use of 4 chords, like we have A minor, C major, G major, and eventually F major at the middle of the song. Because Barbara Arens wants that the student feels co-author of the piece, she wrote the challenge: you will be making up your own left hand here, so you can write your name as you feel co-author of the piece. So this blank space is for the student to write their own name. And in the previous page, in which there is an introduction of the piece, Barbara Arens asks the student to play what she calls power chords, which basically are octaves with an added fifth. She intends basically that the student plays a full chord as a blocked position. However, she recommends that if the students have like tinier hands because they are still growing, they can arpeggiate the accompaniment. Another thing else related with the arrangements of pieces is that she recommends that the students play the accompaniment to introduce the texture before they start to play the melody. Let's listen Revenge, a piece level 3 in the rendition by Barbara Arens. Although I picked specifically a Scottish tune to represent this collection, other styles integrated in this collection are rock or pop music as well. The following set of collections are based on technical features. And we have 2 collections in this set. The first one is one-hand piano, the first collection that I spoke about at the very beginning of the presentation. One-hand piano was published in 2013, and it was, as I've said before, the first collection that Barbara Arens ever published. This collection has 40 pieces, of which 17 can be played either with right or with left hand. I think that that's, to me, that was really striking. In the preface, the composer says that the inspiration of this collection came after realizing that many injured piano lovers would like to have repertoire to play with one hand. And in her own words, that type of repertoire was, at the time, as common as blue Steinways. So the thematic of the pieces in this case is quite varied. There is not, because what gives unity to the entire collection are the technical features. The pieces can be based basically on anything, either traditional music or, as we saw before, the inspiration by geographic places, so on. The piece that I chose to represent this collection is called Kyoto. This piece specifically can be used as a piece for either right hand or left hand. As we can see in the music, we have the fingering written for the right hand on the top and the italicized numbers below for the left hand. This piece specifically is named Kyoto and makes reference to the Japanese city of Kyoto. Because of that, Barbara Arens decided to use the pentatonic scale to recreate the culture of this country. So everything happens among black keys. In terms of texture, what we can see is that the bottom line has a chordal accompaniment that will require the use of pedal, and a melody that has staccatos, something that helps to the student to work on different articulations. As you can see, the harmonic rhythm lasts usually 2 measures, and although the piece is relatively static, at least in regard to the chords that we have on the bottom line, they change throughout the piece. This is a piece level 3. Particularly appealing about this piece is that on the bottom, if you ever see the book, you will see that there is a comment that invites the students to keep improvising in black keys. Something also quite infrequent. So that's why I picked this piece to choose to you. The next collection that we are going to listen and learn today is the Arens Challenge. The Arens Challenge is the only book that in which Barbara Arens wrote etudes. And they are tailored for specific needs of the pianist. As the title indicates, each piece is inspired in a Greek mythology character. So that's why it's called the Arens Challenge. Like each etude, it's basically a challenge by itself. The type of technical features that you can see developed throughout the collection are lips on both hands, dynamic control, tremolos, etc. And as you're going to see, as it happened in the Vampire Challenge, we have first an explanation about the mythology Greek character of choice, but also a preview of that specific etude. So, the piece that I chose to show you today is Apollo Plays His Lyre. In this piece, basically what we have are hand-over-hand arpeggios that they are basically happening in the entire keyboard. Something really interesting about this etude specifically is the fact that although the pianist is going throughout the entire topography, the extension of the hand doesn't need to be necessarily too big. And as I was saying earlier, the etude had a preview. In this preview, basically Barbara Arens, what she suggests is The preview brings awareness about the use of different harmonies. So, for example, we have the 1 chord 4 5, which can be presented either as blocked chords or, as the author suggests, by playing it as arpeggios. What I like the most about the preview is that it not only introduces the technical feature by itself, it also has an explanation about the primary chords of the key. Something that is very useful because once that the student starts to play the etude, the chords are in disguise, which means that usually when that happens, we lose awareness about the harmony that we are playing. So this type of preview, I thought it was particularly useful. So let's listen Apollo play his lyre. An important feature that have in common Kyoto and this is Apollo plays his lyre is that both pieces not only are develop specific technical features, but also they focus on the proper use of dynamics and the production of a delicate sound. The following set of collections that we are going to see and listen today are collections based on images. So the first collection of this set is called Dreaming at the Piano. It's a collection that it was published at the same time that the Shakespeare collection. However, the form of the pieces in comparison with the Shakespeare collection is less predictable. However, the first piece, the one that actually I'm going to present, is called Recurring Dreams. Recurring Dreams is a piece that has a harmonic progression that lasts the first 8 measures and then it gets repeated with multiple variations throughout the entire piece. Although there is an intermediate section in which the author presents a new theme before the A section close to the end. This piece it was particularly interesting to me because it's clearly built around the use of variation as a compositional technique. Something that can be used as analysis to introduce improvisation into the piano lesson. This is a piece level 4, and as you can see, along the piece introduced different variations. What we can see is that the chronometric density gets higher, which means that we have more notes per beat and increases the tension of the piece. So we are going to listen to Recurring Dreams. collection that we are going to see and listen today is the Magritte collection. This collection is the one that has the highest level of complexity among all the collections that we studied today. And it is inspired by the paintings, or actually the titles of the paintings of the Belgian painter Renoir-François Magritte. It is known that Magritte had a friend, a poet, with whom he would meet every Sunday and ask for help to pick the title of his pieces, which usually are not necessarily connected with the image itself. And in regard to the level of complexity, the most of pieces last 3 pages and are around levels 7 to 9. The piece that I chose to introduce you to this collection is called Souvenir de Voyage, the memory of a journey, and it's a barcarola type character piece in which the melody is at the bottom of the chordal texture in the right hand. Something that is really important about this piece itself is not only the proper introduction of how the melody is intertwined among the chords, but also introduced to the style of the piece in terms of the connection that it has with the painter itself. This is a piece level 8, and we are going to listen to Souvenir de Voyage. I wish we could keep listening, but we need to continue. So, in order to find these collections, what we can do, it depends basically on the publisher, right? So the collections by Breitkopf and Härtel can be purchased directly in the website of the publisher as a printed volume in all cases, but also is available to buy by music distributors. The collection published by Streta Music Compass can be purchased on the website of the publisher, but in this case can be as a printed volume, but also as a download. In the case of the self-published collections, they are all available in Amazon on demand, and they can be purchased either as a printed volume or as an e-book. Okay, based on what we saw today, it's fair to say that Barbara Arens' repertoire can have multiple uses and incorporate many musical styles. The inspiration to write music comes from different artistic sources that they can be either images, themes, characters, poetry. She really tried to explore many different ways in which themes can be incorporated into her music. The use of patterned textures shows a high influence of minimalism in her works, but although I think that the most interesting thing and the most important one is that the use of patterned textures shows her interest in developed technique in students. And something else that is really interesting about all the collections that we saw today is that Barbara Arens is not only interested in reaching young students or adults. Like she tries to do everything, and she really tried to target different interests that they can be appealing for the piano student. And I wanted to share with you, probably you already know, but Barbara Arens has donated all her self-published works, and she asked Breitkopf and Härtel to make us have a copy of all her collections, which are available at 003. She has Facebook. If you want to reach out, she loves people. So feel free to talk to her if you ever want to. She's super nice person. And well, this is all what I have today for you. Feel free to ask me questions, but at this point I'm in researcher mode, so I'm learning with you all. Thanks for your time listening.
Any questions for Yasmin?
I have one. Just a clarification.
Yes.
In Bollywood, does she, in the piece Bollywood,
Yeah.
does she integrate two elements of culture? I'm hearing a little bit of the Indian dance and then...
Yeah, I think that, to be completely honest, I was learning about Hindi culture as I was researching for the piece. I think that what happens in Bollywood movies is that they try to integrate their own musical features as much as they try to integrate pop or popular music from Western cultures. And I think that she tried to recreate that, and that's why the first part is because the confusing thing about that piece is that it has the major time signature, and then it doesn't have reading tone for a while, and then it does, and then in the second part she presents that Arabian scale. So I think that she was committed to show everything in that single piece, and I think that that's what she was trying to do. But I will ask her.
I have a question about leveling. Did you level all these pieces yourself?
Yes,
And then,
with Dr. Ernst's help.
and then when you were, while you were leveling them, was it consistent in each book? Like I noticed you took excerpts from each book.
Yeah.
Was the leveling consistent throughout each book, or did it vary a lot?
Yeah, I think that Barbara Arens always tried to have it's not necessarily consistent, but I didn't find as I was seeing the pieces that one was super easy and then the other one was really complex. I think that there is unity throughout the entire collection, although some pieces they have more complexity than others. And then the themes also help to delimit the level of the pieces, because for example in the Vampire Challenge those pieces overall were easier, or in the Ericles Challenge too. I don't know if that makes sense. Okay.
Thank you.
Is that Dracula book, is it all lead sheets?
I think, you know what I was thinking as I was researching for this? I was thinking that, I was saying that the Shakespeare collection is for adults, and I read my first Shakespeare play when I was 13. I think that it depends on the maturity of the student.
I asked if in the Dracula book if they're lead sheets.
There are lead sheets, yes.
Are they all lead sheets?
No, they are not.
Oh.
There are 2 lead sheets, and then the rest of the collection are pieces. They have different characteristics, but they are not all lead sheets.
Any other questions? Well, thank you, Yasmin, for such a well-researched